Conan Exiles 2? The topic of a sequel or remaster to the original Conan Exiles has been a semi-joke in the community for a little while, but after a recent discussion in my Coffee Cult Discord, link to join in the description by the way, I got to thinking, would Conan ever actually get a sequel? Well, I think it's kind of possible, and I thought it'd make a fun topic to discuss today. Before we get into it, when I say sequel, I don't necessarily mean an actual storyline sequel, probably more of a situation where Conan would get a new upgraded version on a new engine, DLCs ported over, etc., basically a modern day refresh of the game. I'll probably end up using sequel and remaster interchangeably, but that's what I mean when I say either of them. So, let's get into it. I'll be honest, my gut instinct reaction to the idea of a sequel for Conan Exiles is that it's probably possible. I definitely don't think it'd be something that happens soon, but it is something that I think might happen. The only mention of a Conan Exiles 2 from the development team was a pretty clear joke from Dennis on the Age of Sorcery Chapter 1 dev stream. I don't think it was meant to be taken seriously, but since the joke was made, I've seen a few people mention the possibility of a sequel or more likely a remaster. I do actually think it's possible, and I've got some evidence to support that. Firstly, well, Dennis mentioned it. This is a weak piece of evidence, to be fair. It was clearly a bit of tongue-in-cheek humour, and we know that not everything Dennis jokes about is true, as clearly evidenced by the whole Age of Amazon saga. However, it does prove that at least somewhere on Funcom's radar, this idea is there, even if it's just a passing thought. I think probably the more compelling piece of evidence is the issue of rights and who owns properties. Back in 2021, Funcom announced a complete acquisition of Cabinet Group, which owned intellectual properties like Mutant Year Zero, Solomon Kane, and importantly, Conan the Barbarian. Funcom has, from my understanding, complete ownership and control of the Conan IP, and they can basically do whatever they want with it. This article did say they were overseeing the development of an unannounced game featuring characters in the Howard universe. I think that game was probably Conan Chop Chop, as that did release about a year after this article. That being said, owning the IP is really important. Dune Awakening is obviously Funcom's next big project, but also, as far as I understand, they don't own the IP, they just license it. That means that ultimately they're probably not the only controlling party, and at some point in the future, although hopefully not, they may lose that license. This has happened to a ton of other devs in the past that have licensed properties they've then lost the rights to. I think Dead by Daylight had a few DLCs they removed once the license expired, and of course Friday the 13th the game, one of my favourite games, was killed by a license dispute too. That one still hurts. Anyway, owning the IP is really important, as Funcom are the controlling party of what happens with that property, and if they develop something for it themselves, they alone will reap the benefits. The final supporting factor is the engine that Conan currently uses and the technical issues in the game itself. The question of upgrading Conan from Unreal Engine 4 to UE5 in the current game has been answered countless times, and it's the same answer. Upgrading wouldn't provide that many benefits and would add an immediate backlog of over a year's worth of engine work, meaning basically no updates, no new content, just straight engine work to even get the game functioning. Conan Exiles is a live service game, so quite frankly that's a no-go. However, if you're developing a remastered version on an updated engine, you can do that separately whilst having the old version still running, kind of like how Ark upgraded from Ark Survival Evolved to Ark Survival Ascended. There's also the question of the multitude of issues Conan's faced over the past couple of years. I'm not a game dev, I don't know much technical about development, but I'm basing this on what I know and what I've heard from other games. A lot of Conan's coding is probably quite old and fairly spaghettified now, which could be causing quite a number of issues. Couple that with the aging hardware of old-gen consoles like PS4 and Xbox One, alongside potential new hire developers growing more accustomed to UE5 over UE4, it seems almost inevitable that the upgrade will have to happen at some point. Unreal Engine 5 will become industry standard if it's not already, not only for what we play, but what the back-end developers are experienced with using, and Unreal 4 will just become obsolete at some point. Upgrading the engine through a remaster and cleaning up the old spaghetti coding could help streamline and potentially fix some of the snowballing issues, though of course it wouldn't be a magic bullet fix. Again, I'm not super technically minded on this, so if I'm wrong on any of the points in this section, please do let me know in the comments. So we've discussed the evidence for a sequel, but what about the evidence against it? Well, there are a couple of points. Firstly, the devs haven't really put any feelers out. That's kind of circumstantial, they wouldn't necessarily have to, we know the devs have a lot more data than what we have. The topic has only come up as a passing comment or joke, so even though it is somewhere on their radar of thoughts, it may be just that, a passing thought. Secondly, and probably the biggest one, is that June is Funcom's next big project. Even if they are working on or thinking of working on a remaster or sequel, the focus is on June until that releases at least. Funcom isn't an enormous company, it's fairly big I think, but it's no Activision or Blizzard. Then again, they don't have the best track record either. If they did want to work on a remaster, it probably wouldn't be priority until June is at least in early access, if not full release. That being said, Funcom has worked with other dev studios before to create games like Chop Chop or Horde Slayer in the IP, and if memory serves, I think Ark Survival Ascended was created by Wildcard and another third-party studio together, so I suppose there is an outsourcing option. Even if Funcom were already working on a sequel, we almost certainly wouldn't hear anything until June has released. Overall though, I think there's probably a better chance of a remaster happening than it not happening. They own the IP, it'd probably help with development and future-proofing, but crucially, there's potentially money in it. If any company sees money in something, they'll probably do it. So let's say a year or two down the line we do get Conan Exiles 2 or remastered or whatever, what would it need? Well, firstly, goes without saying, but CE2 would need to be upgraded to Unreal Engine 5. I'd also think they'd want to offer cheap upgrade paths to existing Conan Exiles owners, especially on console where they'd likely need to leave PS4 and Xbox One behind to focus on current and next gen. Another thing, and a really important thing they would need, would be a seamless migration of all purchases. Bazaar, DLC, old battle passes, nothing should be removed. People have spent good money on those features and they should be ported over to the remastered version. Of course, a new player would still have the option to purchase DLC, Bazaar items, etc. If a remaster does happen, I pretty much take this as a given. It would be a horrendous move not to do this, so I think it's pretty cut and dry. On that similar topic, I also think this would be a good opportunity to make the Isle of Siptar DLC part of the base game experience. I was initially against this idea a while ago, but let's be honest, Siptar is kind of a failure. It doesn't have many players, and that's mostly because of the buy-in price. I think a lot of people would default to the Exiled Lands anyway, but it's much easier to get people to try out Siptar if it's a base game experience. For pre-existing owners, give them a bunch of exclusive cosmetics that cannot be attained anywhere else. They're exclusive for people who previously purchased the DLC, similar to how pre-orders got the Conan Royal Armour set. Spruce Siptar up a bit, add some new mechanics, new unique loot, and importantly a unique experience that can't be found on the Exiled Lands, and I think Siptar might not end up being a failure anymore. I don't necessarily expect everyone to agree with that, but that's my view on the Siptar topic. I also think the game would need 3 things to be successful: cross-platform play, cross-platform transfers of purchases, and server transfers. Cross-platform is just a no-brainer. The player base at large prefers private servers, but if you want to get more people on officials, crossplay is a really good way to go about it, and it just improves community cohesion in general. Cross-platform purchase transfers is a feature that probably wouldn't be used too much, but it is important to have. Some people want to move from PlayStation to Xbox, Xbox to PlayStation, or from console to PC. If you've sank, say, $50 or $100 into the Bazaar, or even if you only just sank $1, you should be able to take it with you to any platform you choose through a secure process. Nobody should ever lose any of their purchases. Server transfers are, again, a bit of a no-brainer. We had them briefly, they were closed for unknown reasons and have never returned. If there was any time to bring them back, especially if Siptar is made base game and thus concerns of pay to win are removed, then it just makes sense to allow people to travel between the Exiled Lands and Siptar and enjoy the best of both worlds. I also think mods on consoles would be really good to have. I know there's a lot of moving parts behind the scenes that a lot of us don't really see, but if it's doable with a remaster, mods on consoles is just such an easy win to take. Final point, a remaster would need to launch with an Exiled Lands map expansion at the minimum, if not a new map entirely. A new map is a big ask, it's far more development time than expansion, and after Siptar, I imagine Funcom are still a bit wary of new maps. However, a sequel/remaster would be the perfect time to fill that void in the top right corner and finish off the geography of the Exiled Lands. I discussed that topic in depth in another video a while ago, and some of the current limitations are technical, but if the game is remastered, I think those hurdles could be jumped. To wrap things up, I've thought about the topic of a remaster briefly before, but it wasn't until that initial Discord conversation about a sequel that I really started to analyse the topic and consider if a remaster could even be a thing. There's very little direct evidence to go on, but from my assessment at least, it could very well be possible at some point, and to be fair, I think it's at least a somewhat realistic possibility. It's obvious that a lot of people still care about Conan Exiles and the Conan IP itself, even if the game as of now has been bogged down with bugs and all sorts of issues. The main thing for me, and I imagine a lot of other people, would be that I'd want a sequel to not just be a cash grab. I want it to actually open opportunities and avenues towards improving the overall experience. If Funcom remastered Conan and got the execution right, it could be, excuse the pun, game-changing. I know this is mostly a spitball topic of circumstantial evidence and logic-based guesswork, but I'd like to know your thoughts in the comments. It's a topic that comes up occasionally in the wider Conan community, and to be fair, I think it's quite an interesting discussion to have. Thank you for watching, and of course a massive thanks to our wonderful esteemed coffee cultists for continuing to support the channel over on Patreon. If you want to see videos early and support the channel directly, consider joining us over on Patreon, link in the description and pinned comments. Take care, and I'll see you soon.